Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Three Things with Catherine Cortez Masto. Today we are going to talk about Trump's tariffs, reproductive freedoms, and how we can all work together to hold Donald Trump accountable. Now, you might recognize today's guest from the missing minute that we did in my very first episode, but I am so pleased. She's a very good friend of mine. She is a wonderful senator for the state of Minnesota, and she is joining me today, Senator Tina Smith. So thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Catherine. I'm excited to be part of Three Things.
Yeah, you don't know what to expect, but we'll capture it all on video for you.
That's the fun of it.
We'll get it. So one of the things that was important for me, and this is really so I can get out to folks back home and they can understand what's happening here and some of the stuff that's going on in Nevada. But one of the things is the tariffs, and I want to talk to you about that because a lot of people hear what the administration is doing with respect to tariffs, but they don't understand, quite honestly, what that means for them at the end of the day. And we've been saying, listen, tariffs at the end of the day is ultimately a tax on individuals. It's higher costs for individuals, right? So if you would, I would be curious how you're dealing with that in Minnesota when people ask you about Trump's tariffs and the impact, particularly for Canada, right? Since you're so close to Canada.
Right. Well, so Minnesota is deeply affected by these across-the-board blanket tariffs. They're really, as you say, taxes that the president has been imposing. And so the first thing that Minnesotans are talking about is like, man, this is so chaotic. Like, what is it? It's on again, it's off again. How much is it? What is it really going to mean? People are really put off by all of that chaos. I'm sure it's the same in Nevada.
Same thing. Yeah.
Right. Now, so Minnesota's have a very significant agriculture sector. So export of ag products is really important to our economy, really important to Minnesota farmers. And so for them, they are anticipating the retaliatory tariffs that is going to mess up their global markets.
Yeah, and people forget about that. So because Donald Trump has said, we're going to impose tariffs to kind of protect our businesses here, but what people don't realize is those countries like Canada are going to do retaliatory tariffs and increase the cost even more for some of our businesses.
That's exactly right. And that's exactly right. And so, of course, Minnesota farmers want fair access to markets, and sometimes that's not the case. Yeah. And so we understand that tariffs can be a tool, but this across-the-board blanket approach is really hard on farmers. They're already having a hard time. It's really hard on consumers, because they're worried. Okay, this means that my car's going to cost more. The home remodeling project that I want to do is going to cost more. My groceries are going to cost more. Yeah. And at a time when a lot of Minnesotans are just trying to figure out how to afford their lives.
That's right, because I hear that back in Nevada, and I will tell you, it's not even as the tariffs get imposed, it is just the chaos that it has created. There are some of my small businesses that have already lost contracts with Canada just because of the chaos and the negativity that is happening right now. And what is so crazy about this, and I'm curious what you think, Canada is a good trading partner.
I know.
It's not like they're bad players. They're good on their labor issues. They're great trading partners. You know, obviously we need to be tougher on some areas, and they need to be tougher with us. That's why under the first administration for Donald Trump, he negotiated the USMCA with Canada. Right. And now he comes in and violates his own negotiating agreement and makes all this stuff up and makes it even harder for us to deal with one of our great allies here.
Totally agree. So I think this is a problem in two ways, because one, and you're hitting on this, I mean, Minnesotans are manufacturing a lot of goods, let's say, especially a lot of healthcare, products, medical devices, and those kinds of products. So the component for the pacemaker might be assembled in Minnesota, but the component might be from Mexico. So that means their supply chain for making that pacemaker gets all messed up.
That's right.
When this tariff happens. But here's the other thing that I say at home, that when people hear this, they kind of go, what? So what Donald Trump is trying to do is to impose these blanket across-the-board tariffs to raise trillions of dollars in money. That's basically a tax on everybody in this country. Who's going to get hit the hardest by it? Middle-class people, working-class people. And why is he doing that? So he can give a big tax cut to Elon Musk and other people. So this is a massively unfair and hurting middle-class tax to benefit folks like Elon Musk and billionaires.
Well, and that's right. I mean, even before he got into office, Donald Trump was saying, on day one, I'm going to lower your grocery prices.
Right.
I'm going to lower prices and costs for Americans, American family. He has not even done any of that.
No.
In fact, all of his policies have been just the opposite, increasing costs. And by the way, not only increasing costs for families, if you are somebody that worked hard and you invested your retirement in the stock market, well, the stock market's going down. There goes your retirement as well, thanks to Donald Trump and his policies.
That's so true.
The other thing that people forget about, and I see it in, particularly in Nevada, for Las Vegas, tourism. Canadian tourism. It's a big deal.
Such a great point.
Yeah, it's a big deal for Las Vegas. It is a big deal for this country. Our tourism and travel is a billion-dollar industry in the United States. And these tariffs, particularly with Canada, but all these other reciprocal tariffs, are having a negative impact on that economy and that industry. And people have no idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it covers a lot and is having a major impact. I want to talk to you also about something that, because people don't know your background before you were United States Senator, but one of the areas that you really were focused on was women's reproductive freedom. And you and I, we worked on, and you, basically your lead, and if you would talk a little bit about this, is we introduced the Comstock Act.
Yeah, we've been great partners on this.
So talk a little bit about that and kind of your work
Yeah.
in the past on women's rights.
Well, so long before I was ever in the Senate, I once worked at Planned Parenthood. I worked at our Planned Parenthood affiliate in Minneapolis, Minnesota, my hometown, and so every day in that job, I watched people walk through the doors of our clinic who were fully capable of making the very best decisions for themselves about their health care. They came in for cancer screenings, mammograms, testing for STIs, birth control, and abortions. And I learned so much from those patients, and I bring that with me to the Senate. So one of the things that I was just stunned by as we were anticipating watching what the Supreme Court was doing, stripping away people's freedom to make their own decisions. And come to find out that there's this old arcane law that's been around for 150 years. Everybody assumed that it was unconstitutional and it could never be brought back again.
So we never dealt with it. We never tried to change it in
Right,
Congress.
just it never was repealed. It just sits there, and it's called the Comstock Act. And basically, what it would do, we still think it's unconstitutional, but in the wrong hands, like in the hands of Donald Trump and his anti-abortion, anti-choice administration, we're worried that they could use the Comstock Act to take away access, especially to medication abortion, without a single act of Congress, with no legislative action at all. We think this would be unconstitutional, but there's a real worry that they would do that. So you and I have worked on legislation which would repeal the Comstock Act. The Comstock Act basically says that that you cannot mail lewd or lascivious materials, including materials used for abortion, through the U.S. mail. And so we would repeal that, and it would be just make it harder.
That's right. And part of this is, and I hear this in my state, people forget. So a good portion of when we talk about women's reproductive rights, including the abortion rights, a good portion of that is done through mifepristone, the abortion pill.
Yes.
Doctors' involvement. This is something that has been going on for the last 50 years. It's safe
and effective.
There's no challenges with it. But why it's important is because I know in my rural communities, when a lot of people don't have access to clinics, or they have to drive 4 hours, they can maybe get a doctor, or they can have a doctor through telehealth and telemedicine. Very hard to drive 4 hours, but to access this pill, if they need it with a doctor's support, they can get it in the mail, right?
That's exactly
and
right.
So what the
Great way of
administration,
describing it.
that's right, and so the administration now is trying to put another barrier for women to have access to this medicated abortion by limiting their ability to get it in the mail, and it's going to devastate not just our rural communities, but also in our urban areas, right, where people would access it.
This is a medication that has been available, it's been safe, proven effective for decades, and it's used early in pregnancy, and it would be just be another health care disaster for women if the access to mifepristone were reduced or taken away, and so that's why we're working on the Comstock Act. Thanks for working on this with me.
Thank you. Well,
it's been great.
So you bring an incredible I just, because your background, so when you talk about it and you're on the floor of the Senate or you're just talking to people, the emotion is behind it as well, because I think oftentimes when we're here in this little bubble of DC, there's always data and graphs, and we talk about it in numbers, and people forget the real lives, right, out there in Main Street, where we live and where we grow.
Well, you do
where
such a good
neighbors
job
are,
of that
right?
too. Yeah.
But that's part of this, and so you bring those stories and those faces here.
Well, and you know what I learned from that work was that people who are in the midst of making a decision about their reproductive lives, you know, I mean, that's a decision about your life. It's you know, for you, it's not political.
That's right.
It's not a political decision. It's about your health care. It's about your ability to make your own decisions about what you want to have happen in your life. And what I learned is that if you don't have control over your reproductive life, as a woman, you have no control over your life, period. And that's something that people need and they expect. It
Well,
shouldn't be
and
a
part of this is, and it drives me
privilege. You're
crazy,
right.
women are half the population.
Yeah.
Why shouldn't we not have the freedom and right to decide what our healthcare choices are?
Yeah.
Why do we need, quite honestly, men dictating and passing legislation and telling us what we can or cannot do?
Yeah.
It just frustrates me to no end. And here's the other thing, and I know we're going to move on here, but I see it in my own nieces who at a time grew up thinking this was not an issue they'd ever have to deal with, and then overnight Dobbs' decision comes and flips it upside down.
I know.
And now we have a whole young generation that are now thinking, holy cow, they just took away my freedoms and my right to make decisions about my own health care. This is crazy.
Yeah.
And so let me jump to the third one, which is, how do we hold Donald Trump accountable? What you know, there's a lot of conversation about what are you doing, what's out there, show us how you're pushing back, fighting back. I'm curious your thoughts on that.
So and I know you are too. I mean, I am pushing back and speaking out in all the ways that I know how. And I can tell you when I'm home in Minnesota that people are really mobilizing themselves. They're deeply concerned. They're worried. In some cases, they're really angry. Some cases, they're scared, and they are all, you know, looking for what to do. And also at the same time, I think what President Trump is trying to do is to make people feel like they're powerless, like they actually don't have any control. And so what I've been doing is just going out and talking to as many people as I can and reminding them that they do have power, and reminding them also that, like, this is something that our colleague Senator Cory Booker from New Jersey was just saying, and I really appreciated it. He was saying, you know, change doesn't come in Washington, change comes to Washington.
That's right.
It is people that cause the change, and that is where all the power is. So, but what do you find when you go home?
It's the same thing. I think there's a lot of, people are rightfully concerned. And it could be a number of issues.
Yeah.
But they see the chaos, they see what is happening, they see their freedoms, their decision making, their control being taken away from them. They don't know what the future is going to be like, whether it's an individual or family or a business, right? Business uncertainty is just through the roof. But what I say the same thing to them is, this is now a time not for just your elected leaders to do something. This is a time for all of us. This government is for all of us. This is our government.
Mm-hmm.
That's
right.
our White House. This is all of us, right? This is why really in the First Amendment, it is the people, redress of grievances by the people, right? To the government, not to a king, but to the government. And the goal here is to make sure that, I really talk to them and say, listen, I understand what you're saying. Here's what I'm doing, because I do think we have an oversight role, and we're shining a light on what's happening, because there's nothing more that Donald Trump would like than to do this in the dark of night, right? That's why there's so much chaos. So you don't actually see what he's doing.
Right.
So it is important we use our oversight role, and we shine a light, and we ask the questions, and we get the information. But I also think there's a role for people.
Oh,
and they have to
absolutely.
decide what it looks like for them, and be engaged. But because we are not going to make this change without the people of this country.
That's right.
That's the only way. That's our system of government. That's how it was set up.
Yeah.
And this is now our moment for all of us to figure out what is that. And I also say, but here's what we can all gear towards when we figure that, as we move forward and we're fighting our fights. The first step here is that first election. Because a backstop to Donald Trump is
totally
making sure
agree.
that, quite honestly, the Republicans are no longer in control of one house of Congress or both. Elections matter, as we now see, and we've got to put people who are responsible in government who really want to protect our freedoms, right? Who understand women's right to choose, but so many more things that are happening in this country, and want to that support business and want to grow the economy.
Well, and I think you do such a great job also of just, like, people's lives are so busy. Most people don't have time to pay attention to the turn of the screw politics of what happens here in Washington, D.C., and honestly, they shouldn't have to. But what you do such a good job of is talking about specifically how people's lives are affected by the decisions that are getting made by the president, and that's the best way of holding him accountable. What does it mean for your grocery, bills? What does it mean for your right to, vote? What does it mean for your right to get access to health care? And I just really admire you for that.
Well, thank you. I have to say one thing here because, we've talked a lot about Medicaid. I was home talking about Medicaid cuts and the impact, and people. Unless you're feeling it, you don't really understand the implications of it. And there's this misnomer that I think our Republicans have pushed out there that somehow people on Medicaid are just sitting at home and don't want to work and they just want to milk the system. Yeah. And that's actually not true. A lot of people on Medicaid are working.
Right.
And so I was in one of our clinics, FQHC clinic in northern Nevada, and I was talking with them because they have a very strong community and patient base that comes through there. And I said, where are these people? Are they working? And where are you finding that they are working? And they said, oh yeah, everybody that comes through here, they're working, and they predominantly work at Amazon.
Yes.
So this is what infuriates me. So you have these billionaires that have these companies, and they don't care enough to give their employees insurance, so they'd rather let the government cover that for them, and then they want to cut it away from them, right? Yeah, this is why this doesn't make sense.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, and so we got to push up against it. So thank you. Thank you for joining me.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, so we have the missing minute now, and it's apropos that Tina's with me, because the first time we did this, the missing minute was Tina running to catch one of the trains that, as we go from our offices to the Capitol, she had missed, the door had closed, and so she missed it. So she was running to catch up with it. So we caught that on tape, and I showed it.
Because I was trying to get on the train with you. These are these driverless trains in these tunnel subway. They're like little tunnel subways that the senators and staff and visitors take going back and forth between our offices and the Capitol. And I was just like, I was hell-bent to catch that train.
And you were. You did. She was fast. Okay, so this is the second missing minute. And so this is my question for you. Actually, let me show this, and then you got to explain it.
Okay.
We'll show this picture, but who is this?
Okay.
What's going on here?
So this is a picture of me and Senator Tammy Baldwin from Wisconsin, and Tammy and I are making a joke by dressing exactly the same, because it probably happens 3 or 4 times a week that somebody will think that I'm Tammy or will think that Tammy is me. And we try to keep a good sense of humor about it. But, I mean, as I say, there are only 26 women in the United States Senate.
And we all look alike. So
and it shouldn't be that hard to keep this. There have been more men named Charles in the United States Senate than there have been women total.
Wow.
So, and I mean, the stories. One time I was out on the plaza, Catherine, and I had a group of students come up to me, and they go, "We love you, Senator Baldwin." And I'm in kind of a rush. And so I decided I will accept the compliment and pass it on to Tammy later. And so I say thank you. and then they continue to engage with me, and they want to take pictures, and then I become embarrassed. I'm going to be outed here. So I said, actually, I'm not Senator Baldwin. I'm Senator Smith from Minnesota. And then they were like, "Oh, we love you too." So it all worked
wonderful.
out. So that's the story.
And it's a great story because it happens all the time. I was following you into committee hearing, and the press were waiting outside to talk with all of us. And one of the reporters said to you, "Senator Baldwin, what do you think about da 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 da?" And you said, I'm not Senator Baldwin. I'm Senator Smith," and just kept going.
You'll have to ask Senator Baldwin that question.
Exactly.
I know.
It's true. We all look alike. But you know what? This is fascinating to me. And let me just, the final thing, because this is the key, and I think it's key for us. We need more women in the Senate. We just really do.
Yeah.
We haven't had enough.
Yeah.
And I find the women in the Senate actually work together because we get along. We have dinners together. We have conversations. We try to find common ground. And I think we're solutions oriented, and that's what it's about.
I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
Totally agree. And we both are from states that have 2 women senators.
That's right.
So,
Yeah.
we know what we're talking about.
Good. Well, thank you for joining me.
Thanks, Catherine.